my name is Jared, and today we'll be looking at an introduction to web design and development. During this workshop, I'm going to give like the general overview of web design and development. We won't necessarily dive into the actual programming, as there will be a workshop later on in the summer regarding the HTML and CSS programming. So to start, we want to look at how the web is displayed and created. So there are three core skills or technologies used by the web today. That's going to be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is like the skeleton of the website and kind of controls what objects exist on the page. CSS controls the visual presentation, such as the color of the objects or where they appear on screen. In JavaScript, it allows the website to do things, and you can kind of program some logic in the JavaScript code. First, I want to talk about some of the areas of web design. Web design nowadays is a massive field. These are just six like general areas that you can fall under. If you look under the core skills for each of the area, most of them will have HTML and CSS as a skill. So if you're going to be going into web design, you really need to at least know how to interact and use HTML and CSS. If you look here in the bottom middle, where it says CMS specialist or content management system specialist, this is what most web designers at Cal Poly Pomona are, as we use a CMS to display our web pages. So speaking of CMSs or content management systems, let's talk about how they work. They store the content in a database so that the content can easily be reused or repurposed and published whenever needed. And then you also access the CMS through a web browser. So it's very easy to onboard people onto the process. They don't need to download much software, if any. You can just send them a link and they can start to edit a website. So there are some pros and cons to CMSs. Some pros are you can quickly generate the websites. You have some built-in templates. You don't have to deal with site navigation at all. And some CMSs can even create internal applications like calendars or message boards. There are some cons to CMSs. Some of them can be restrictive. It can be hard or impossible to add certain features. And it might be hard or impossible to meet design standards. But since you're using kind of that pre-built framework, this is what you have to deal with. You're trading ease of use for flexibility. So let's talk about how we need to select and register a domain for a website. There are a lot of different domains. There's .com, .org, .info, .net, and there's a lot of country code domains. .io, it's popular for like tech companies. I believe it is actually for the Indian Ocean country code. .ca is for Canada. And if you see below, jaredgriffin.com, it's not the same as jaredgriffin.info. So if you're purchasing or selecting domains, you want to buy as many domains as you can so that competitors don't try to pick them up and kind of redirect to the competitions page. When you're choosing the domain name, you really want to be flexible. So having a list of alternatives is pretty much a necessity. So let's say Jillian has a consulting company called Jillian Consulting. If jillianconsulting.com is taken, we could use something like Consulting by Jillian, or even Make a Million with Jillian. When you're creating your domain name, it being memorable is much more important than it being short. If you had a short URL of just some random characters, it'd be short, but nobody would be able to memorize it. Make a Million with Jillian, it's long, but it is very memorable. So I want to do a little example. So here is Sean.com. It is a nice short domain. So let's click on it. All right, takes us to a landing page where we can try to purchase it. All right, so really no content on this website. Let's go back here. So how much do we think the domain sean.com costs? You think it'd be something relatively reasonable? If you want to buy sean.com, you will have to pay $162,000 according to GoDaddy. But if you see below, sean.cc is only $6 for the first year. So it is, you really need to be flexible on your domain if you are trying to purchase one. Unless you really need that sean.com or that specific name, it's usually not going to be worth it for you to try to get those specific ones. Now that we've picked our domain name, we need somewhere to host our actual website. So there are a few things to look for in web hosting companies. You need to kind of figure out what type of website you have and how large the content is on the website. A lot of hosting companies will advertise unlimited bandwidth, but if you read the fine print, this is actually not true. You can be limited if you have particularly large content that takes up a lot of bandwidth. For price, you don't want to get the cheapest host available, but it probably doesn't make the most sense to get the most expensive one. You want to shop around for them. You also want to pick your right plan. This ties in with how much data transfer is needed. And again, read that fine print to see how much data you're actually allotted. For uptime, if the host is offering 100% uptime, it's untrue. They are most likely being illegitimate. But 99.9% uptime, that is something that most hosts are able to achieve and something you should look for. You also want to check if you'll be hosted on a dedicated versus a shared server. Dedicated servers, you have essentially your own little server running your website. So that would be needed for high performance or popular websites. If you're going to run on a shared server, you want to make sure that hosting company is not hosting sketchy websites. Web indexers like Google will be able to tell that you're being hosted on the same server as a bad website, so you might not even show up in your Google search results. So you don't want that to happen. And here are some examples of hosting companies: DreamHost, A2 Hosting, HostWinds. Most of them have host in their name, so that's nice. So we need tools to edit our code, or if we're going to be editing graphics, we need tools to work with that as well. So there are a few features you want to look for in a code editor. You can start basic. You can change HTML code with the Notepad built into your computer already, but it's not really going to make that much sense if you're doing it professionally. So you want it to be quick. You don't want it to be laggy. You want the code editor to be responsive. So the must-have features are syntax highlighting, line numbering, autocomplete, some sort of powerful find and replace, and ideally you'd want it to support multiple languages so you're not swapping between code editors. I've been using brackets. It is very nice and clean, and you can generate a live preview of the website. People also use Visual Studio Code. I know Visual Studio Code supports a lot of languages. So if you are dealing with the graphics on the web, you want to look for some things in the editor. You want it to be able to work with both vector and raster graphics. You again want it to be speedy, and you want it to have good export optimization tools. You don't want really large images on a website, as it could take a long time to load and hurt your responsiveness of the website. For these tools, you're pretty much going to need to use the Adobe Creative Suite, as most other people also use that. If you're working in a team, most people will be using the Adobe Creative Cloud, so you want to be able to send them files and open the Adobe Illustrator files they send to you, and likewise. All right, so when you are developing a website, you want to stick to some web standards. So nowadays we have web standards for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can actually go on these websites and check out what these standards are. So here's the link for the HTML and CSS standards. It's the World Wide Web Consortium. And for JavaScript, it's the ECMA International website. So you want to use these web standards because it allows your website to be both backwards and forwards compatible. And you really only need to write one version of a website for it to be accessed by all browsers. It's also easier for search engines to find and rank your website if you stick to these standards, as that's what the search engines use. And it allows people using assistive technologies to still be able to view and use the web page. All right, let's talk about how content needs to be displayed on the website. So content is viewed across a wide array of devices, and we can't really constrain it to a certain type of design. A great quote from the video is, "Content must flow like water." So water takes the shape of whatever like vessel it's poured in. So we kind of want our content to do the same, as mobile screens are much more different than regular desktop screens. We need it to kind of flow and fit in each device it's going to be displayed on. So the content strategy is a guiding set of principles that controls how we create and present this content. So that includes the types of content, who's responsible for said content, kind of defining the workflows for the creation and maintenance of the content, and how we want to present it. If you have a powerful or strong content strategy guidelines, your website will generally come out looking much more fit and finished. So let's talk about a typical web design workflow. These vary a lot, but this is a general workflow. On the left, you can see the 4 segments. It's a very simplified version. We have planning, design, development, and publishing. On the right, you can see a much more in-depth layout. You can see the actual programming and coding of the website happens pretty late in the actual design process. So let's get into that. So for the first workflow segment, which is planning, you want to create a project brief. You need to describe how large or describe the scope of the project. You want to set expectations for both yourself and the client, and you want to outline what you'll actually deliver to the client at the end of the project. We also want to do a content survey, so we can identify the types of content for the project, and we can also rank said content in order of importance, just in case we need to be able to cut some content from the website. During the planning workflow segment, we will also do our content strategy, which I previously discussed, and you'll create your initial site plan, layout, how the site's going to be mapped, and any features the website might need. So the next step is design. So we want to start with a sketch. So you can, some designers like to sketch on physical paper, or some like to do it in code. I like doing it in code, as you can actively see the changes you are making. And after you're done sketching it, you can actually begin work with that sketch. You can also experiment with ideas fairly easily. After sketching, you want to create a prototype that you can send to the client or any other designers. It's a functional example of the site, project, or a specific feature that allows the designer or client to get a hands-on look at the product. You can also, during the prototyping step, you can also test the effectiveness of the navigation and content discoverability, and make changes before the site gets too far along. During the design workflow segment, you also want to generate your site assets like the icons, fonts, video, images, or anything else that is going to be displayed on the website. So after that, we will get into the development step. So this is when we actually begin to program. So we'll have that layout, and we will have to create it using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's a good idea to use versioning software such as GitHub. So if you make a large mistake, you can always revert back to a previous version. While you're developing the website, you always want to be testing it with continuous testing. And don't just test on one platform. You want to test on mobile, on desktop. You want to find any errors you can early on in the process. If it's a very large project, you can actually consult a outside firm to do usability testing, and that will also give you a great idea of how the website's going. At the end of the development process, you want to have your final review with the client. So during this final meeting, you want to make sure the client knows this is the final review and it's the last chance to make changes before the website goes live to the public. So speaking of going live, the last segment is publishing. Depending on how you've negotiated your contract with the client, you might not be responsible for managing the website after it's been launched, or you may be. You want to figure out the contract before you create the website so you know when your support needs to end. All right, so during this process, I found some very helpful tools that I'd like to show you guys. So these are just links to the Google Chrome store. So let's try them out really quick. So here is pesticide. Let's run it on the website. Let's do this. Where is it? There we go. I'm gonna have to make it smaller so I can see. So pesticide, it allows us, it kind of outlines each bit of content on a website and helps you kind of just understand how this website is laid out. Here you can see each individual button. It's good to just get an idea of how content is laid out, really just for exploring. So let's move on to the next one, which is CSS Peeper. This allows you to get content and colors from the website. So let's make it bigger. Here you can see all the colors this website is using. You can click on an individual button to see the color, the size, the text align, anything like that. And you can also grab all of the assets, which is a great feature. So here you can just export the assets, and then you have a high resolution copy of whatever is on the website. After that, we have Wappalyzer, which is a way to see the content. It is a way to see the technologies used on the website. We would like to work. There we go. So here we can see that our website is using Crazy Egg for analytics, Font Awesome for any fonts and scripting. The web server is using this. We're using Bootstrap for the UI framework. It's great to get an idea of how interesting websites are created, and then you can kind of copy those technologies. After that, we have Ditto. It's just a clipboard manager. Just in case you're copying code and you accidentally copy over something, it'll save that previously copied bit of code. And this link here would take us to Reddit, where there is a massive list of tools for web designers and developers. Right. So you can actually do this yourself. You can create a website yourself pretty easily. So you can use you first need to register your own domain on a website like Namecheap or GoDaddy. I found Namecheap was much cheaper than GoDaddy, so that is what I used. Then you need to host your website. GitHub will actually host your a one-page website for you for free. And then after that, all you need to do is create an HTML web page or use a HTML template from the web. I just Googled free HTML5 template and found plenty of websites that allowed me to use them for free. So this is my website I created. It is currently a work in progress, but it only costs me about $10 a year. So it is pretty inexpensive. So it's very simple. It's just got my headshot, a little quote, and then a very bad example of my resume. But it also links to my LinkedIn and my email. And it only costs me $10 a year. It is a great idea to do. And you want to probably purchase your domain earlier before it gets taken if you have a common name. I was lucky Jared Griffin was available for just about $10 a year. All right, here are my references. Thank you.